Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of E27 webinar. It's so good to see you all here. So my name is Anissa from the E27 content team. Now today we are going to talk about growing your startup workforce. We have a special speaker with 10 years of experience as senior HR executive at Google, who had also developed a methodology for startup to grow the right organization and the right team. She had also recently published her book From Zero to 1000. We will share the excerpt of the book soon in our chat because we have already published it some time ago. So if you're interested, feel free to check it out. So please welcome our speaker for today, Anne Caron. Hi, Anne.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. How are you? I hope you're great.
I'm good. Yeah, really excited to be here and to be able to, to help those founders or founders to be here in order to build a successful startup. I've just started to share my screen. Can you see it?
Has started seeing sharing right now, but we're still seeing. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic.
It's working. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So today we're going to speak about the reality to grow a successful startup. Well, how to grow a successful startup, but also deep diving into what the reality of growing a startup is. And most importantly, what are the different stages between 0 to 1,000 employees? What are the challenges, but also what are the steps to go? So there is a common assumption that in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to have a great idea. We all know the likes of Google, Facebook, Airbnb, Netflix, Uber, great ideas and definitely very successful stories and businesses. But the reality is that 90% of the startups fail. And if we have a look at the top reasons why those startups fail, all of these can be attributed to human or leadership failures. Whether that's go-to-market strategies that failed, whether they failed to build the right teams at the right time, whether they had the wrong pricing strategy or whatsoever. And the reality is that the quality of your strategies is only as good as the people developing them and the quality of the people executing them. So at the heart of every success, you will find people. Companies are made of people, and people can make or break your company. So it is extremely critical to ensure that you have the right people in the right roles at the right time and at every level of the organization in order to be able to execute your business plan. Without the right people in the right roles at the right time, your business plan is pretty much just a nice piece of paper with a beautiful projected bottom line, but that may not be executed. So simply put, it takes 4 things to build a successful startup. First, you need to have a product or a service that people want to buy. You need to be able to generate revenue and find a path to profitability. You need to have enough capital to be able to scale and to have the right pace to grow fast. And you obviously need people as well. But the reality is that most organizations, most founders focus most of their time on the first 3. That's what we've been told. And very little think about the organization, let alone do anything about that. And so as a consequence, as you grow your organization rapidly, your business needs will be much stronger, much bigger than what you can actually deliver. So the organization will lag behind your business needs. It means that what you need to deliver in order to get your business plan executed cannot be done by the people you have in the team. And that accelerates, especially around Series A, Series B. As long as you're growing at a reasonable scale, it's okay to be proactive. You can improvise a little bit. If you need to increase your online presence, you may ask your team who has bandwidth and somehow improvise somebody as an online media associate. They will just create some post and publish that online. You could potentially hire 1 or 2 interns to do that. But from the moment you reach Series A, Series B, it's not just a couple of interns that you need. It's a whole marketing team with a real marketing strategy that you need to put in place. And that's not just true for marketing, it's true for every single line of the business. Very quickly, this is what it looks like. So all of a sudden, you need to hire a lot of people, so marketing, sales, customer service, engineers, products, or whatsoever. And in order to hire all those people, you need recruiters. So you need to recruit recruiters to recruit for the business. And you need to build your employer brand in order to hire these right people. You need to have HR capability as well to make sure that your people get paid on time, that they can take vacation, that they have an idea of what your HR policies are. And as you hire all these people, you need to set some structure so that they know more or less what they're supposed to be doing, who they report to. And as you realize that they need to report to someone, you need to hire also managers. And if you don't hire managers, you need to at least train those that you promote to management roles. Also, your role as a leader is aimed to change, etc., etc. So welcome to hypergrowth phase. This is very much what most of founders feel like when they reach that phase of hypergrowth. Hypergrowth is very much around Series A, Series B. That's basically when the investors are coming to you and they say, well, we trust your product, seems to be working fine. You have a good go-to-market strategy. Now what we need from you is to scale, so go big. And that's why everything accelerates so quickly. And unless you have anticipated that, it can be quite chaotic. So you need to prepare. The journey to become an entrepreneur and to build a successful startup is pretty much the same as preparing for a race, and not any type of race. It's probably closer to a triathlon, right? Because you have a number of different things to do. Your role will have to change. Your company will change as well. And so it's not, once you finish the running part and you arrive at the swimming part that you need to realize, oops, I forgot to pack up my swimming costume in my bag. No, you need to have that ready for the right moment. So that's the main thing. What you need to know as an entrepreneur, as a founder, is that you have to prepare for all the changes that will come in front of you. I actually gave a talk last week about resilience. Obviously, building resilient teams is very important to every business because we come across a lot of challenges as we go. I mean, the COVID is a very clear one that we have all had to face recently. But know that as an entrepreneur, there's going to be even more challenges on your way. So of course, there will be crises to face, but if at least you can prepare and get ready for those that can be predicted, that will put you ahead of the curve. So know that all these, whether that's the different stages of your company, the different roles that you will have to wear as a founder, can be prepared, and let's try to prepare that. So that's what I'm going to walk you through. What are the different things that you can already prepare for so that you don't have the surprise of that and build your own resilience. So what's the reality of building a startup? There are 5 different stages of growth of a startup. And building a startup, growing a startup is pretty similar to raising a kid. Raising a kid of 6 months old is very different to raising a kid of 5 years old, which is very different to raising a kid of 15 years old. And it's the same for a company. It's not the same managing a company of 10 employees, 50 employees, or 500 employees. So these are roughly the different stages that you have to plan for and how it will happen. So the numbers here are in terms of number of employees. The age of innocence is the very beginning, and it's quite easy. It will always be remembered as the good old days. Everything is smooth, everybody is super excited, there's a high level of commitment. The objective is pretty clear. We need to survive and we need to grow fast. Everybody knows each other. If they have a question, they go directly to the founder. All decisions are more or less being made together. So things are quite smooth. It becomes a little bit more complicated when you reach 30 people and above, because all of a sudden you've hired quite a number of people because you need to scale. That's usually reaching Series A-ish. And so people start to wonder a little bit who's doing what, because you're hiring people when there's a need, they more or less overlap sometimes. And so it becomes a little bit complicated. People also feel a little bit unclear about why decisions are being made. They feel further from the founding team. And there's some frustration because they were part of the decisions before, and now they're not really part of that. So it becomes a bit more complicated here. And it becomes even more complicated if you have kids or if you remember your pre-adolescence. You actually don't see it coming. You know, very quickly, your company is 75 people and more. You have hired very quickly without realizing the company is so big. And all of a sudden, the silos are starting somehow to form, and clarity is coming even more. Employees are starting to ask questions that you were not used to. They're starting to ask about career progression. They're starting to be more demanding in terms of the support that they're getting from the managers. The new joiners are feeling super lost because there's not necessarily a great structure to onboard them. And you're not here as a founder to be onboarding every single one and sharing with them your vision and all the context that you have of the organization. And basically, the way you have managed these first 3 phases will very much define how well you're doing with the next 2. Again, if I take the example of a kid, when you reach adolescence, there's not much that you can do. You're not going to tell your adolescent, your teenager, to go to bed at 8:30 and, you know, listen to you. That doesn't work like that. So at this stage of your company, you can't really expect people to do just because you said. You need to have a system in place. You need to be able to rely on your managers, on your systems, your tracking and monitoring systems, your engagement systems, etc. So that's kind of the whole process that you're going to go through. And these are therefore the number of things that you need to be building little by little, so that when you come to pre-adolescence or adolescence phase, it's not all of a sudden, oops, we forgot to actually clarify and articulate our company culture, or oops, we don't have a performance management system in place to ensure that people are clear about what they're supposed to do. So all this needs to be built gradually. I'm not going to go into detail about those right now. That's what we will be covering in the part 2 in 2 weeks' time. So the reality of your company of the organization is evolving, and you need to be prepared for these different stages. And you as a founder will also need to be changing. And the hard thing is that you don't know what you don't know, and that's all fine. We don't expect you to know absolutely everything. That would be crazy. But you need to know that you don't know what you don't know. That's important, because that's how you can prepare for what's coming. And so what's coming ahead is that as a founder, your role will have to evolve. As I said, being a parent of a 6-month-old, 5-year-old, or 15 years old is quite different. You don't play the same role. You can't be with a 50 years old. That doesn't work. So that's the same with being a founder of a company. So it means that your skills also will have to change. And the deconcerting truth is that the skills required to be good in your first role are not necessarily the same as you go along, and they may actually be preventing you from being a good one. The 3 different roles that you will be evolving into in your journey as a founder is the jack of all trades, the manager, and the leader. What do I mean by the jack of all trades? It's the early stage, right? You're basically almost by yourself or with a couple of co-founders, possibly a small team at the beginning, and you need to do it all. You wear all the different hats. You're the salesperson, you're the admin, you're the HR, you're the marketing, you're the finance, you're everyone, right? You have all these hats on you. And so you have to be extremely resourceful. You have to be extremely hands-on. If we think about the founders of companies like Grab or Better Flores or Redmart, I mean, these founders were actually delivering or going after Anthony at Grab was actually going and hire the cab drivers himself at the beginning. So you need to be extremely hands-on, and you need to also be flexible, right? You need to be able to change and pivot when it's needed. So it's super, super hands-on. When the organization grows to 10, 15 people, you start to have a decent team, and these people need a manager. First, because you can't be good at all the 15 hats that you have above your head. So you need to hire people better than you and trust them that they are going to do a good job, even if they're not necessarily doing it the same way that you are, or not seeing it as quickly as you are. But it's extremely frustrating because you were really good. You were really getting good at the jack of all trades. And all of a sudden, we're asking you to delegate. Hire people to do it and delegate. And it's very hard because you see the issues and you're not necessarily able to do it yourself, and you need to hold on and ask them to do it. And that's complicated. And on top of that, they need you to provide information, to provide context. So your role is not about doing, it's about informing, about equipping your teams. And the last role is about the business leader. When you reach a size of 50 plus, you can't be in the operations anymore. Where the organization needs you is to lead the way, to provide a direction, to ensure that you're providing the system for the organization to deliver the right, the right job to execute the business plan. So your job here is not on the execution. You should be involved. You should not be involved in the operations anymore. You're involved in building the organization, setting up the executive team, and building the strategy. And that's complicated because your startup is your baby, and you basically have to give it away to other people, delegating and trusting that they're going to do good. So that's frustrating, and it requires quite different skills. So as we said, You don't know what you don't know, and that's fine. We're not expecting you to know it all, but the journey is going to be complicated, and you will need, like any other athlete, to build a strong supporting team. So who are these people? Obviously, surround yourself with advisors that you can trust, that you can be vulnerable with, that you can open up on your issues with, or that could be consultant. Make sure that you are surrounded by fellow founders, people like you who have gone through it as well, and who will share perhaps some tips or share the burden as well, and you will realize that you're not the only one going through that. Investors, choose your investors wisely, because they can be a pain, but they can also be a great support. You may also want to consider having a coach to accelerate your learning as you go from the jack of all trade to the manager, and then to be able to learn the skills to be a better leader. And of course, don't forget your loved ones. That's your break. That's what will ensure that you can also refresh a little bit from time to time and be healthier. And a healthy founder is a healthy organization. So how do you build all that? It's the people strategy. To be a successful entrepreneur, you need to plan your journey. So that's what we spoke just before. But how do you do that? The strategy is basically a plan to ensure that you can achieve the long run. And that's what we want, right? So it starts from a vision, you build a plan, and hopefully you will get to the success. The way I phrase that is the organization roadmap. The same way that you have a roadmap for your product, you need a roadmap for your organization in order to be able to build all the different capabilities on time for when you need them. As we said, building a team takes time. Before you can build your whole engineering team, you need to hire recruiters that can recruit good engineers. You need to hire the HR team that will be able to manage this team. You need to promote managers, etc. So these are typically the different things that you need to build, most typically in that order, starting with the company culture, then building the foundation of the people organization, and then building the framework around performance and engagement. So these are roughly how that fits with the different stage of growth of your startup. Again, we will go into the details of that in the next session in 2 weeks' time. When you do that, you're a little bit more relaxed. As I said, it's about building resilience and ensuring that you're not adding stress to situations that can be already quite stressful, that will be changing. We live in a world where change happens very fast. There are a number of different crises that you will have to go through. Try to optimize your time and to anticipate as much as possible what you can anticipate. So the key takeaways: prepare the path ahead, build a strong supporting team to help you. You can't be good everywhere. And build your organization roadmap so that you know when you need to build the capabilities for the next stage. Thank you very much for all this. The detail of that is quite developed in my book. So if you're interested in the different phases of growth, I highly recommend you to look through all that in my book that you can find on Amazon. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And that was some very interesting introductory session. And for the attendees, you can find the excerpt of the book in our chat feature. And if you have any questions, feel free to put it on our Q&A box. And before the attendees are giving away their questions, I also have some questions on my own to ask to Anne. So yeah, you mentioned about the importance of building a team roadmap. And then also there's also the supporting team itself. Now, can you give us like more tips and advice on how do you build this team roadmap? Like what are the factors that we need to consider when we're doing that?
So the factors that you need to take into consideration are the fact that when you feel the need, it's almost a little bit too late, because as I said, it takes time to build. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm speaking about studying the path ahead. When you feel that people are not very clear about what your culture or your values are, mm-hmm. It means that already you're getting a sense, they're getting a sense of discrepancy between what you're saying and what you're doing. And it's going to be difficult to bring change. So the idea is to study the path ahead. So how to study that? Look at other organizations. Know how do you get started is also, build your business plan. So your business as much as possible 12 months ahead, if not 12 months, 6 months at the very least. But if it's 12 months, your project, it doesn't have to be absolutely the truth, but at least it's a direction. So set yourself clear about what do you want to have achieved in 12 months. Okay. And in order to achieve that, in order to that reality to become true, whether that's we need to open a new office in Indonesia, or we need to launch a new product, in order for this to be true and to be delivered, to be up and running in 12 months' time, what are the capabilities that you need? Basically, what are the teams in place? What are the needs that we will have? So we will need to have product teams, we will need to have customer service teams, we will need to have sales people in the new office. And so that's not when you actually launch the product that you will say, oh, now we need to have the sales team. No, you need to plan ahead, because it takes time to hire, it takes time to train people, and it takes time to build a pipeline of clients, for instance. So that's kind of the idea. You go 12 months ahead, and then you define what are the capabilities that you need, and then you go backward to say, okay, when do we need them trained by? When do, therefore, we need to have them onboarded by? When do we need to start hiring them by? And therefore, when do we need to hire recruiters, or whether they're internal recruiters or agencies by?
Okay, thank you. And now we already have one question coming from our attendee, from Fadim Eremif. Hi, Fadim. When is the right time to hire full-time HR in a startup company?
Very good question. Yes. So 50 people is the latest, I would say. But there is a huge challenge here. Because when we speak about HR, usually we think about the administrative and operations side of things. So recruiting for one, the payroll, the leaves, all the administration side of things. But there's much more to that. And the reality is that when you're a small startup, you're most probably going to hire somebody that is quite junior. It doesn't make sense to hire a director or VP of HR if you're only 30 people. So you're most probably going to hire a HR manager who has 5 years of experience, etc. The thing is that this person who is really well fitted to deliver on the administrative and operations side of things might not necessarily be the right person to develop your strategy, to build the organization roadmap, because they don't have the experience and the knowledge for that. So as much as you will be hiring for this, still there is a gap that needs to be filled at the strategic level. And that needs to be filled by you, the founder, until you hire somebody that is senior enough, VP, directors, chief HR officer, whatsoever, who will be able to then take on the strategy side of things. and be able to build systems. Because again, I mean, your HR manager might have run performance management systems, for instance, in their previous company. Doesn't mean that they know how to design the right performance management system for your company that is in sync with your culture, and that will not be over engineered for the size of your startup. So yes, there is a gap for that. My advice is to get help from outside, so advisors or consultants that can bring that expertise without necessarily hiring full-time, because it doesn't make sense. So that's true for the people strategy. Same way that it's true for other part of the business, right? Before you hire a strong marketing person or chief marketing officer, you may use external help to ensure that you have the right strategy designed, and then being able to provide the right information, the right guidance to the team on the ground, delivering, executing.
All right, okay, thank you. So now we have two more questions coming up, and I think they're sort of related. Like the first one we have from Tun Yong Yap. Hi, Tun Yong. At what stage do you consider hiring C-level executives, and what are the key factors that we need to consider?
Yes, very good question. So two things. It depends. So C-level is a title. So a lot of startups have co-founders being Cs. And so you would have a CEO, a CTO, and a COO, for instance, very early stage, although the company is only 10 people, for instance. So I would say that the title doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is the level of experience, the level of responsibilities. That's complicated. Usually that's when you reached 200-ish people. There are some difficult conversations that usually have to happen between the CEO, usually the CEO or the board, and the existing team, whether they are co-founders or the initial team. But the reality is that the person that built your, made the first code for your product, well, must probably not be your ultimate CTO. The person that made the first sales will probably not be your chief commercial officer in the long run. And so beyond the title, I think it's important to have those conversations with the founding team or the initial team as early as possible. And it can go like that. It's like, okay, we will be at some point reaching our, the maximum of our growth potential. And the organization will grow much quicker than what we can grow. And so when this time happens, we need to be okay with having the conversation and say, well, for the good of the business, we need to replace ourselves. So have this conversation as early as possible. Say, okay, we will one day have this conversation. And as a founder, as a CEO, for instance, my commitment is to be true to you and to have that conversation. That will be hard, but we will need that for the good of the business, but also for the good of the organization. There's nothing worse than an organization where there is a C-level that is usually a co-founder that is not necessarily having a real role. It's just we're trying to move this person from roles to roles just to give them a sense. And if you see that, you can be sure that the rest of the organization sees it. Everybody's in the company knows that this person is actually not really doing anything. And this person probably knows it as well and feels quite uncomfortable about it. So have this conversation, and it could be, it could be, okay, that's the end of the journey for you. That was fantastic. I mean, look where you brought us. It's amazing. And it's better to leave when you're at the top of your game than when you're already going down. So you can either say goodbye and, go and find another journey, and happy to help you with that. Or it's like, let's hire somebody above you. Now you can't grow. So the fastest way for you to grow quicker and better is to have somebody above you, a manager, a mentor that you can learn from. So that's the case for most of the C-level at 200 plus 500 for sure. Unless, they manage to grow, but in order to grow, as I said, you need to prepare in advance. You need to know that, okay, I need to learn fast. That when you need to run an organization of 500 people, that all of a sudden you need to learn management skills. It's not good for leadership skills. So yeah, be prepared for that.
Okay, I see. Now for the next question, it's from Ralph Regalado. Hi, Ralph. I'm going to divide it into two parts because he has lots of questions. So the first one would be, how do you bring your leadership team with you from the age of innocence stage to childhood to adolescence and all the way through? Does the leadership change as the company grows?
Yeah. Yes. So actually, it's also connected with the previous question. Yeah. Yes. So from 0 to 30, the age of innocence, the leadership doesn't necessarily matter much. You are a jack of all trades. All of you are a jack of all trades, and you start becoming managers. You need to, and so in order to be a good manager, you need to be able to delegate. You need to equip your teams. Performance is not about you anymore. It's about your team. So you need to be able to facilitate that. Obviously, it doesn't mean that you're not, you stop doing anything. There will still be things to do, but more and more, you gradually hire people better than you to take off some of your hats. When you become a leader, so as a CEO, you become a business leader, that's when the leadership team is your responsibility. So your responsibility is to build the organization, and you're managing the leadership team. And the leadership team is the most important team in the organization. There's nothing worse than leadership, executives who do not speak to each other. And it's not just about being in meetings where everybody is just doing an update. Okay, on the tech side, this is where we are. This is the product roadmap. This is where we are on the sales front. We are doing this and we're planning. It's not just updates. Updates can actually be done over email very well. It's about speaking about strategic issues, discussing them as a team, and making decisions together. Even if the ultimate decision is made by the CEO, which is fine, but at least everybody in the team has been part of the conversation. They have been able to voice their concerns, their opinion, to come up with other options if they thought that a better option was better, and be part of the decision process and understand why we're landing on this. From the moment you build this properly, the leadership team is much stronger and cohesion. There's stronger cohesion in the leadership team. Why does that matter? Because this leadership team is the one then cascading down the information, the context about what needs to be done. When there is no cohesion at the leadership level, that's when the silos start to form. Typically, the tech team, for instance, will keep on bitching about the sales team because the sales team never tells us in advance when we need to do that, or da-da-da. And similarly on the other side, because they don't understand necessarily the reality on both sides of the spectrum of the business. So it's important that at the top, everybody is clear and is one team, and that's the role of the founder. The number one role of the founder is to build the organization and the leadership team.
Okay, all right, thank you. So now we're moving on to the second part of Ralph's questions. How do you balance between providing an opportunity for the original team members to grow to the role versus hiring someone with experience from outside?
So there are two things. One is the potential of growth for the person, especially when you're speaking about in promoting people into management roles. Being a manager is very, very, very different to being a good individual contributor. So you can have an excellent individual contributor and they may suck as a manager, and that's okay. So first, before promoting people, train them to be good. So if you want to promote them as managers, make sure that they understand what it means and that they know how to delegate, how to give feedback, how to have difficult conversations, etc. The second thing is, do they want to? Promotion doesn't have to be vertical all the time. And some people are not necessarily willing or made for being managers or leaders. That's very often the case in tech, for instance. A lot of engineers shy away and they're like, no, please, I actually don't really want to have people management responsibilities. And that's okay. What you need is to be able also to look at progression horizontally. So build experts in your teams, because you will need that. You will need go-to person for each areas of your business, and that's fine. They will become mentors for the new joiners. They will become the go-to person for the C+ development of or the architecture, etc. So it's important. First, what is their potential for growth, and how are you preparing that for that? Second, do they want? Is that exactly what they want? And educate people on the fact that it's not just about going up, becoming a manager. There are all the ways of growing and developing.
All right, thank you, Em. So I personally have questions regarding outsourcing, which is quite common for some startups in the earlier stages. Like for example, when they are outsourcing their tech team. So what are the steps that we need to consider if a startup deciding that it wants to outsource some part of its team? What are the do's and don'ts when we are deciding to do this?
Sorry, I just realized I didn't really answer the first question, which is, when do you need to hire external? Well, hire external if you can't build the capabilities inside. And I think it's, don't force it. Don't force it. And even sometimes, so that, and I will transition to the outsourcing. Mm-hmm. Hiring is complicated, and obviously, there are not always enough talents for which we want to hire, and a lot of different companies going for the same talents. So, as a rule, I would say, do not hire until you're sure that you have the right person. So you're better off with no one than the wrong person into the role. That's, I would say, a main rule, which actually is not really true at the very early stage of your startup, because at the very early stage of your startup, you actually don't really know what you need. You're still figuring this out. So I would say the first 10 employees, it might be trial and error. So you will probably need to do some hire fast, fire fast, and again, be okay with that. But yeah, you're still figuring out who you are and what your needs are. So that's fine. But as you grow, you're better off with no one than the wrong person, because the consequences can be extremely painful for the business in terms of morale, in terms of productivity, in terms of culture as well. So ensure that who you're bringing in is the right person, because the first 100 and 200 people in your organization will define the next 500 to 1,000, because they are the one hiring them, they are the one training them, they are the one mentoring, managing them, etc. And so when you don't find the right person for this, but you still need the work to be done, that's when you can look at alternatives. It could be a consultant to hire, that's one option. So you hire a consultant, which gives you the flexibility. And then if you're happy with what they do, you can hire them full time. That's an option. You can have also, outsource. You can have temp or, interns or temporals or, just for a contract determined, amount of time. So look at all the different options, and there's a positive for each of them, depending on what you need, and definitely helping you to figure out what you actually need. Sometimes the capabilities, so I've seen that for a number of companies that are not necessarily, they're tech companies, the product itself is not that techy. It doesn't require necessarily at the beginning to have a tech team on board. And so when the founders are not necessarily tech themselves, it's very unclear what are the capabilities that they need within the organization as opposed to what they can outsource. And sometimes having somebody, a product manager or a chief product officer could be enough, because what matters is to ensure that you're building the right product design, really, that fits with the go-to-market strategy. But the technology is not that complex or that critical to develop internally. And in that case, you can externalize.
Okay, so those are basically the principles that we need to consider before we decided to externalize.
Yeah, it's about how difficult it is for you to hire internally. If you don't find, so go internally. I mean, to within. The second is it making sense? Is it cost effective to hire the capability, and is it strategic? Because it could be skills that it's not strategic to keep it inside. There might not necessarily be a huge element of confidentiality associated to that. And in that case, you can use external.
All right. Okay. Now we have another one coming from an anonymous attendee. Hello. And it's quite interesting. How would you recommend to define company values? Now back to the basics.
Okay, so I will try to give a short answer, because we will cover that in the next session. That's actually the first step to building the organization. It starts by defining the culture, and the values is one element of the culture. But basically, to have good values, you need to be honest and authentic. Okay. I'm seeing very often startups who look up to the Google, the Facebook, the Netflix, etc., and want to duplicate the startup feel from the Silicon Valley into the startup, and who will have some values such as empowerment, fun, family, this type of things. It only works if these are your true values, if this is what you believe in and the way you behave. For instance, if you're typically always late to meeting, don't put punctuality in your values, right? Because it won't work. If you're always late, everybody will be late, and that's okay. That's part of your culture. So be honest about who you are and embrace it. And these make your values. Your values will only be good from the moment people see a consistency between what they know the values are and the way they are experiencing working for you. And there is no bad and good culture. It's not about Google is good and banks are not good. No, there are a lot of people who love working in very structured environment. So if naturally you're not necessarily somebody that delegates easily, you're more of a control freak, probably do not put a value that is empowering, because naturally you may not do it. And you would end up being lying to your candidates and lying to your employees, and the value itself will have no power, will will be nil.
Yeah, that reminds me about building company culture, because sometimes when people are talking about startups and company culture, they tend to think about providing games and beanie bags on the office, while the truth is that often it's never being used because they just don't have the culture to.
Yeah, no, but exactly. I mean, the culture, so bean bags, foosball table, free snacks is not a culture. That's not what will create the culture. The culture is about how people experience working with you. So values, the way when I run workshops around building the company culture, especially on the value side, I involve the entire organization as much as possible to collect data around how they experience working in the organization. If the values, and that's the same for the mission and vision, but especially true for the values, if the values have been set, designed, decided by the founder itself, it's like, I wish we were, it won't work, because they will be objectives, not values. They will be aspirational, and they are objectives. Values are grounded in reality. They are a description of your current work environment.
All right, I see. Okay, so I think we have exhausted our Q&A list. So for the attendees, if you have any other questions that you would like to ask to Anne, so how can they reach out to you, Anne?
You can reach out to me over LinkedIn. I'm quite responsive. Otherwise, on my website, so caronconsulting.com, you can reach out to me there.
All right, great. So please take note, attendees, if you are too shy to ask the questions publicly here. All right, so I think we are nearing to the end of our session. I'm going to show my screen again because there's something that I need to announce. All right, so we have gone through the Q&A session, and next episode of E27 webinars. So we're going to have another Meet the VC. This is a widely popular episode for our community. And next week, we're going to have Genesis Ventures. We will have Martin Tang, and you can discuss with him and talk to him about their investment philosophy, especially in this very interesting and challenging time. And also after this, we will send out a survey shortly after the webinar. So kindly take your time to let us know the topics that you wish to hear, and if there is any particular speaker that you would like to be featured in this webinar. And also, meanwhile, as always, feel free to reach out to the E27 team. We're available in this platforms. We're also available on our email, writers@e27.co. We also have a Telegram channel. Feel free to join us and then take part in our interesting community discussion. All right, so I think that's all that we have for today. And thank you everyone for tuning in and for giving away your questions and being part of this conversation. And thank you very much, Anne, for this insightful presentation. We will see you again in the second part in 2 weeks.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Take care.